Denver Broncos Mile High View, no commercials, no bullshit. Who the hell is Floyd Little? Was he on Pink Floyd? You know, he might as well have been on Pink Floyd when you talk and when you listen to sports talk radio in Denver. Man, I have to chime in because they're doing these stupid best 60 Broncos players, yada yada. And every time they come up to Floyd Little, it's like, yeah, he I guess was important. You know, it's basically, it's not really a fault of theirs. I mean, none of those people were around. But not only was I around, I actually met Floyd when he was on the sideline as a Denver Bronco playing. So I kind of know something about those times. Getting Floyd, well, let's go to this numbering system, okay? Floyd's importance. This is where I guess the real reason I chimed in, and I'm going to give you the reason why. In reality, one thing I hate about all these numbers, in reality, all these players are number ones in their own way, because without them, collectively, you don't really have the Denver Broncos. I mean, so they're all kind of number ones in their own way. Just, I don't like, well, he's, 15, but he's 16, that's not right. Okay, so everybody was important, was equally important at some point. And I think most people probably can understand that, but I guess it's just fun to put numbers on people. But there's no doubt, in reality, Floyd Little would be the number one selection. And for those that don't understand why, without Floyd Little, there would have been no John Elway. When the Denver Broncos became an American football team, they wore Golden High School's colors donated from the Colorado School of Mines, the gold and brown. Back in the day, that was Golden High School's colors, gold and brown. So, it was a fledgling American football league team. And where Floyd Little becomes so important to the Denver Bronco organization is that when the merger was going to happen between the AFL and the NFL, there was a lot of talk about moving the Denver Broncos out of Denver. They were going to lose the football team. So Floyd came along and basically went door to door, petitioning to keep the Broncos. None of the sports talk will talk about it because none of them know. I don't even know if Sandy Clough knows. Woody Page probably knows. I mean, he's been around long enough. But Floyd Little it was a big deal. Let's go even back further. It was a big deal to get Floyd Little back in the day. I mean, the Giants organization was and the fan base was absolutely furious that the NFL let Floyd Little go to, of all teams, the Denver Broncos. Like the Denver Broncos, that's a cow town in the middle of nowhere. And it really was back in those days. You remember they were going to leave. Floyd was instrumental. Floyd was a big deal. First, let's go back to Floyd. Floyd was a big deal coming out of Syracuse. Coming out of Syracuse, you had the three-headed monsters. You had Ernie Davis, Jim Brown, and Ernie Davis bringing in Floyd Little made up the three-headed monster. You have to understand, this is the 1960s, and football fields are much more narrow. They're almost like arena football. Almost, not quite, but they're very narrow football fields, still 100 yards across, but very, very narrow on sideline to sideline. So running the ball is a big deal. Getting 100 yards under those conditions, even today, would be really tough if they brought those fields back into old school regulation. Throwing the ball, it was difficult too. But in those days, the quarterbacks weren't worshipped, weren't franchised, and all this nonsense. You know, you had to really, as a quarterback, you really had to prove yourself. You don't care; they didn't care what you did in college, but you really had to prove yourself on the field to get anybody to pay attention. But the focus was on running backs because it was still pretty much a smash mouth sport. You know, still rugby style. Smash mouth. There's, the San Diego Chargers, Air Coryell, that kind of broke open the passing. In the AFL that was their kind of their shtick too. And again, I bring up Air Coryell and the San Diego Chargers with that aerial, the aerial passing as the kind of the age of that, the dawning of that. But when Floyd came out, it was still running back. The running backs were the prima donnas coming. I don't know what running back was going to be, carry the team. And Floyd Little was a big deal because, he was an all-purpose back where you got Jim Brown more or less is just like a steamroller, just rolling people. He was. I mean, for all intent and purpose, he's like a defensive end turned running back, just just plowing over people. But Floyd was different. He was a good between the tackles runner like Jim Brown, but he did something Jim Brown didn't do, and he was an all-purpose. He could be a wide receiver, and just as good as any wide receiver out there. They would take him and put him in a wide receiver slot. Now, when I watched Terrell Davis, it was the first time it was against Dallas on an exhibition game. I think that was the Tokyo game. The famous Tokyo, I would have jumped over the fence. Terrell Davis said if he hadn't been in Tokyo, he would have jumped over the fence. I believe it was that game. Well, I saw Terrell Davis, and I'm like, holy shit. He said, we finally got a running back, because I immediately saw Floyd Little in him. But I want to tell you something, for all you that, Terrell Davis is, he got the Super Bowl. Let me put it this way. You put Floyd Little at his age out of college behind Mark Schlereth, the offensive line that Terrell Davis had. And I'm not trying to downplay Terrell Davis, but I'm going to tell you, nothing changes. And if even anything, it's even a bigger emphasis. Because Floyd Little didn't have that offensive line in front of him. And I've got video, I got a video clip. YouTube video that you can see, and you can see the Terrell Davis similarities in their running styles. But Terrell Davis wasn't a receiver either. So you would have had that on top of just the running game. I mean, Terrell Davis could have, Floyd Little would have easily got 2,000 yards. And with the type of offensive line he had, that Terrell Davis had, plus the field being as wide as it is, that wouldn't have been hard at all for Floyd Little. So nothing would have changed if you swapped the two around. Could Terrell Davis play behind a crap line like Floyd Little did? Plus the mileage that they got out of Floyd Little compared to Terrell Davis. Now I do want to say something about Terrell Davis above a lot of players in the NFL. I believe that Terrell Davis was playing under handicap. Playing with a disability. That's what I'm trying to say is Terrell Davis was playing with a disability. I can't even fathom, even in my wildest dreams, what playing football with massive migraine headaches could have been like. That is just beyond, that's perplexing. That somebody could play at that level with their head splitting open. Anyway, what I'm going to do is conclude this video before it gets any longer. Why Floyd Little is at least 1, 2, 3 up there is the fact that in the 1960s the Denver Broncos was in a state of flux. In 1965, while Floyd was still in college, the Broncos almost moved. I mean, this had been going on for 5 years, and it just that rippling effect of, is the team going to stay or go? This is going on at the time. The Denver area is skeptical because the team's no good. They bought Bear Stadium, which really was a quasi, I guess you would say, rodeo arena and baseball field. So they needed major upgrades. So they were going to the city, the Broncos were, and say, if we're going to keep the team here, we're going to need money. The city was like, oh, and that this team just, was new and bad. And I guess somebody somewhere wanted the franchise to stay, so Floyd Little comes. And it's in this time of fluctuation, this time of the Denver Broncos could easily be gone as well as they could be staying. It wasn't really etched in stone at that time. It was still kind of wobbling back and forth. The AFL-NFL merger's going on, and people are thinking, if this merger's going on, maybe we should take it to a different city instead of, trying to, maybe if Denver can get themselves a stadium, maybe they'll get a team. But like I said, Floyd was instrumental. He was doing, as a matter of fact, if you look at the link I gave, he's doing these ads for the city, trying to generate money. And Floyd Little saying, hey, I'm going to stay here. This is my town. I want to be a part of this. So it's kind of like trying to generate revenue. They're using him to generate revenue. But part of that was to get the Broncos. That's something that none of the sports talk radio know about. Maybe Sandy Clough remembers it. Maybe he doesn't. But I was here during that time. And I met Floyd Little when, he was playing. So I was around the area at the time. And I, be it I was a kid. I'm not that old. But I was a kid. But I remember that the team, there were a lot of talk about the team leaving. And I remember Floyd Little going door to door to, petition to get the Broncos to stay in Denver. So, he's a big-time player. He's not just a big-time player, but all the work he did shouldn't go unnoticed to keep the Denver Broncos in Denver. Because had he not shown up, it very well could have been. History would have been rewritten. And they, they don't even have any good players, so what's the point? Go ahead and sell the team. So you could, if all else fails, you can thank Floyd Little that the Denver Broncos stayed in the Mile High City.